Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today on Live with Lida. We've got a lot of things to cover today. First up, let's talk for a minute about COVID. Our regional numbers on COVID are still pretty good. But yesterday, there were 237 people who were in the hospital, either specifically with COVID or people who were suspected of having COVID. So 237. During the month of June, so just, here we are on the 1st of July. During the month of June, the high for the number of people in the hospital was 348, and the low last Friday was 212. So yesterday, reporting 237. New hospitalizations reported yesterday were 27. Last week, we had a low of 11. These numbers can fluctuate pretty widely during a 7-day moving average period, but the moving average is still at about 18 new hospitalizations per day. But I know that you all, like I am, you're watching what's happening around the country. And in Missouri yesterday, I'm looking at my notes here to be sure I get this number right. In Missouri yesterday, we had 508 new positive cases. Now, the city only had 40 of those new positive cases, and St. Louis County had 136. So as you can see, most of the new positive cases yesterday in Missouri were in outstate Missouri, particularly southwest Missouri. We're headed into this holiday weekend. 1st of the July here. A lot of people are off on Friday. So one of the things that we've been talking about for weeks is masks. And yesterday, the Pandemic Task Force encouraged us, maybe even pushed us a little, to require that everybody wear a mask when you are indoors in an area of public accommodation. So retail shop, hardware store, grocery store, gas station. So today, St. Louis City and County are announcing that we are requiring all of you to do a little more. Wear a mask if you're inside in public spaces, public places or spaces. It's a level of precaution that the scientists and the doctors really believe will help to continue to protect us. We don't want happening here what's happening in other parts of our country where they have to pull back on their reopening. The other thing is, we don't want to be looking back in a week or 2 weeks and saying, I wish we would have made people wear masks. I wish we would have required that. So, all along we have done this. We have taken the scientific approach. And today, once again, we are saying to you right before this holiday weekend, wear a mask if you're in an indoor space where you can. Now, obviously, there are exceptions to this. If you're eating dinner at a table in a restaurant, you can't be wearing your masks. If you're at the dentist, you can't be wearing your mask. But most places that you go, you can wear your mask. This is my St. Louis Fire Department mask. And it's just a little bit more. Most of you are already doing it, quite frankly. When I go out to the grocery store or whatever, most of you are already doing it. But it's really important that you do it. And it's just a precaution. We don't want to have to pull back on reopening. On Monday, the Monday after the 4th of July, our large venues in the city of St. Louis are going to be allowed to go to 75% capacity, provided they still do social distancing, mask wearing, hand washing. We don't want to pull back on that, because pulling back on that means somebody's losing their job. Somebody's not able to earn a paycheck. So, gotta wear a mask, folks. All right, next subject. Public safety review. I think we just put a press release out on this, or it's coming very soon. But today, Chief John Hayden, Public Safety Director Judge Jimmy Edwards, and I are announcing an outside review of SLMPD, St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department. This review is about policies, best practices. It's also about reducing gun violence. It's about recruiting. It's about training. It's about de-escalation. It's about implicit bias training and racial equity training. It's about acknowledging that Black Lives Matter, but it's also about acknowledging that in St. Louis, far too many Black lives are lost to violence. Gun violence is devastating our community. As of yesterday, June 30th, we had 100 homicides in the city of St. Louis. So this review will be led by Chief Charles Ramsey, sometimes known as Commissioner Chuck Ramsey. And we are so lucky to have him leading this review because he was the co-chair of Obama's task force on 21st century policing. He's also been the police chief in Chicago, in Washington, D.C., and in Philadelphia. He is, if you're all watching the news, you see him all the time talking about police reform, talking about the desire to have better policing in this world that we're in today. So some people might be saying, well, why go to the outside? You know, my point about this is the private sector, private companies, if they have a particularly difficult issue that they're looking at, they always go out and hire the best consultants. The government very rarely has the chance to do that. And thanks today to civic progress companies and RBC companies, St. Louis is going to have the chance to have this really top-notch review recommendations without any cost to taxpayers. Honestly, I don't think we've ever had this kind of an opportunity before, and we've probably never needed it as much. Most cities are doing this now. We are also going to be doing it. The study's going to begin in July. Here we are, we're in July. So in a couple of weeks here, and it'll take a few months. But I think it's something really, really important for our community, for us to be able to build on the good policies, the good procedures that we have now, but also learn from other folks who have done this around the country. I think it'll just be a good opportunity for us all to get better, and that's what we all want to do. So lastly, before we go to questions, I had a lot of things to talk to you about today, but I had to sort of narrow it down to 3 big things. And the last one is the city budget. So it might not feel like this to you, but today's New Year's Day. New Year's Day for the city budget. And we have had to make dramatic cuts in our budget due to the terrible impact on our budget that COVID-19 has had. And I know you all can relate to that because it's affecting many of your families in the same way, and it's affecting business in the same way. So we have a budget here that maintains our core services. Our revenues for this year, that starts right now, today, are down by $67 million. Projected to be down, I should say, by $67 million. But our priorities are health, obviously, public safety, and our core services. What are our core services? Trash pickup, vacant lot mowing, funding affordable housing, demolishing dangerous vacant buildings. We have allocated $5 million of the CARES Act CDBG funds to affordable housing. And the largest portion of our CARES Act funding, which $11.4 million, is directed to preventative housing assistance. So assistance with rent, assistance with mortgages, assistance with utilities, preventing homelessness, trying to keep people in their homes. There's also, of course, the Department of Human Services is expanding the homeless outreach, expanding our shelter space. So like most things, it's about preventing people from becoming homeless, or we're talking about public safety, preventing crimes, but it's also about dealing with the actual homeless services. So we want to keep everyone possible in their homes. And then the last item is about assistance for small business. We've talked about this a little bit already. We've budgeted, and this board bill is going through the Board of Aldermen right now. We think, fingers crossed, it'll be passed tomorrow. And when it is, there'll be $4 million available to assist small businesses. Businesses with 25 or fewer people, priority given to businesses in the promise zone and the choice areas of our city. In order, even though it's only $5,000, these are small businesses, and sometimes you just need that gap funding to keep you in business, to get you over the hump. Today, as of this morning, we had, I think it was 568 people, companies, small companies, apply for that. And so as soon as the Board of Aldermen passes that bill, we'll get it signed, and we'll begin the implementation on awarding those grants. If you have not already, if you're a small business owner and you have not already signed up for one of these small business grants, please do. Just go on our website, very easy to find, click on it, put in your application. Because our goal here is, 1, keep everybody healthy, 2, keep everybody safe, 3, be sure that we are helping you to provide for your livelihood by keeping our businesses open, and so that you'll all be at work. So that's 3 big things that I wanted to chat about today. I'm sure we have questions.
A few questions, Mayor.
All right.
On the issue of the mandatory mask mandate that takes effect on Friday morning, we have several members of the public and the press asking your thoughts about how you envision that being enforced and if there are any penalties for not doing it.
So, you know, all along, I think in every one of these Live with Lidas, I've said, hey guys, wear a mask. So now we're putting a little more oomph behind that. We're requiring people to wear a mask when they are in public places, in public spaces, or outdoors if you think you can't socially distance. I think a lot of the enforcement will be done by the public, frankly. We don't have the mask police there, but what we do have is it's no longer a suggestion or please do it. It's, you really must do it. And so I think that peer pressure will come to bear on this. And St. Louis's have been great all along in terms of following these guidelines. But I think right now, when we see what is happening in this country and even in our own state of Missouri, we have to go to mandatory masks here in St. Louis.
Are businesses allowed in the St. Louis region to turn people away for not wearing a mask if they want to come inside?
They are. They are.
We have a question about the small business program that you mentioned, Mayor. A clarification question. Is it a grant or a loan that will have to be paid back to the city over time?
It's a grant. It's a grant. There are some requirements with it, but it's a grant.
On the issue of COVID-19, do you have an update on contact tracers, what they're finding out, how they've been helpful, and how they've been able to identify new cases of COVID-19 in the city?
So, you know, we identify the new cases really from testing. As I mentioned earlier, yesterday there were 40 new positive cases in the city of St. Louis, 508 across the whole state. So when someone has a positive test result, then our public health department knows about that, and they contact that person and they try to figure out who has that person been in contact with. That's the quote contact tracing. They are very good at that. They've done it for a long time with various diseases, primarily tuberculosis and STDs. And so then they quarantine that person that is tested positive, and they also quarantine those folks that have had direct contact with that person. One of the things that we're seeing and this is in St. Louis as well as across the state and across the country, we are seeing more and more young people test positive for COVID-19. Now, part of that is that older people early on were showing up in hospitals, but we know that young people, we're all out working again, we're all out going out, and maybe young people sometimes feel a bit invincible. So that's one of the things that we're seeing in our test results. And our contact tracing, sometimes young people have even more contacts to trace than somebody who's older. So it's going well, but the key here is to continue to tamp down the spread.
A few more COVID questions, Mayor. Mary's watching, has a question about people who really need to use elevators to get around, like in an apartment building or an office building.
Mm-hmm.
What's the guidance that the city's put forth about small spaces like elevators?
So in the city guidance that we put out a few weeks ago, small elevators really should only have 2 people in it. Now, I don't know how small of an elevator you're referring to. We have some pretty large elevators here at City Hall where we allow 3 or 4 people, but there's no reason for folks to kind of squish in an elevator together. So just take an extra minute, wait for the next elevator if there's too many people. And for goodness sake, wear a mask when you're in the elevator. Hopefully you won't be in there long, but wear your mask.
So Bradley's watching, Mayor, and Bradley's question on masks is, when will masks be required by? I'm guessing he means the effective date or maybe how long?
Well, masks, Friday morning at 7 o'clock. But you might as well start now, folks. Friday morning at 7 o'clock, masks are required in indoor public spaces. Hardware stores, grocery stores, gas stations, dress shops, shoe stores, wherever, Target, all of those places. Friday morning at 7 o'clock, masks are required indoors. Masks have been all along required for the workers in those stores. And they were strongly encouraged for customers. Now they're required for customers.
Lisa's question, Mayor, is can a business in the city apply for one of the COVID-19 relief grants if they've already received a PPP loan from the Small Business Administration?
They can. They can. You can still apply. I believe that was recently changed this week or maybe last week. That was recently changed, so yes, you can.
So other questions, Mayor. We have a follow-up question about Cure Violence.
Good.
There have been some incredibly violent weekends this summer. Is
Mm-hmm.
Cure Violence working on the streets already?
Cure Violence is working. It was 10 days ago probably on a Saturday when Cure Violence really launched in the Wells Goodfellow Hamilton Heights neighborhood. So it's only been going a week or a week and a half now. But you're right. We have had past Friday night, there I believe were 12 people that were shot. Now they weren't killed. They weren't. A couple did die, but that violence is so detrimental to our city. So, you know, I usually talk about violence in this way. There's 2 parts to this. There's prevention and there's enforcement. So prevention is Cure Violence, which we, as you know, have committed $7 million to over 3 years. It is cops and clinicians, which the budget went into effect today, so I guess it's in effect today. Cops and Clinicians is a program where there is a 911 call, but it is not necessarily a call that the cops need to respond to. Maybe it's someone who's having mental distress, etc. So we would have a social worker, a mental health worker. It is all those kinds of programs also to help on the prevention side of violence. And then on the enforcement side of violence, of course, is the police department in order to hopefully make those arrests of folks that are perpetrating this violence. You also know, I'm sure, that we are 145, I think it is right now, police officers short of our authorized strength. There are many all across the country. It's hard to hire police officers. We're no different here, except that here we have 2 additional impediments. One, our pay is not as competitive as it should be. It should be competitive with St. Louis County. And we have a residency requirement. And while I would love all of the cops to live in the city of St. Louis, we have a small population and we need to have more police officers, frankly. So it's prevention and it's enforcement.
2 more masks questions, Mayor.
More masks.
Follow-up question about that. So Sue's asking about gyms having to wear a mask. And then we had a follow-up question in the comments, I think from a Mark or a Michael, about what this means for going to a restaurant.
So I'll take the restaurant one first. What it means for going to a restaurant is when you go to the restaurant and you're going in, you walk in, you put your mask on, you're wearing your mask, you get your table, you get seated at your table with your immediate group, and then your server will be wearing a mask. Your server will be wearing a mask. I'm not sure how well you can hear through that. And then, of course, while you're eating and drinking at your table, you don't have to be wearing your masks. If you get up to go to the bathroom, you got to put your mask on. I mean, that's just sort of some common sense here. When you leave the table, you're finished eating, you've paid the check, you leave the table, put your mask on to walk out. Masks protect you, they protect other people. So, I made a little bit of a joke a bit ago. Yeah, you're not probably going to be wearing your mask while you're at the dentist's office, or maybe not even at the doctor's office, depends. But, when you're getting a haircut, you need to be wearing a mask. When you're shopping for new shoes, you need to be wearing a mask.
So we have a couple of general topic questions that have been submitted. Jennifer would like to know if you could please give your thoughts on the statue of King Louie IX atop Art Hill.
So King Louie IX, very controversial figure. Most of us probably did not know that 6 months ago. Some of you did, because you're students of history. So King Louie IX lived in the 1200s, and the city of St. Louis, of course, is named after him. I understand that judging his behavior by today's standards doesn't look so good. But I also think that taking down that statue and renaming our city is something that we really need to have a much, much broader conversation about. That's not something that I'm in favor of at this point in time. And I think it would be interesting for the various groups. We need to really come together and think through that. I also happen to think that we have a lot of hard work to do in our community. And I don't want to be distracted by removing a statue, because removing the statue won't change any of the disparities that are present in our city today and in our region and in our country. So those are my thoughts about the statue of St. Louis.
We do have a question about what the city is, or how the city is preparing for the backlog of evictions that are set to take place this month through our CARES Act funding.
Yes, so that's what I was talking about a little bit earlier when I was talking about the budget. We know that I believe there are 106 folks whose evictions have been stayed or stopped during the pandemic. And I believe that is lifted next week, middle of the 6th. That's Monday, I guess. And so we have mediation. We were trying to mediate, but to put them in a program of mediation in order to avoid them being evicted. Find other housing for them. So that's one group of folks. And then the second group of folks is people that have been unable to pay their rent or their mortgage during the pandemic. So since about March the 15th. And those folks, there may be a lot of new court filings to try to begin the eviction process on those folks. And for those folks, we have a really good opportunity to do mediation to help with rental assistance, to try to work this out, help them work it out with their landlords to prevent them from being evicted.
People are asking if we could circle back to the gym and the mask question.
Oh, I didn't answer that,
You talked about
did I?
restaurants.
I talked about restaurants. I didn't talk about the gym. What's the question? Do you have to wear a mask at the gym?
Yep.
Yeah. Now, I know that's going to be hard, but there especially, where you're breathing hard and all that, you need to be wearing a mask.
All right, we have time for 2 more questions, Mayor. One question from Marty, who's watching, is wanting to know, is it possible that the city could increase the fines for setting off fireworks? They go on to all hours of every night of the week and keeps his dog up with anxiety.
I know. Marty, and if you probably saw, I think it was in the paper this morning or recently, that people are buying more and more fireworks this year than ever before. Somebody told me, and I haven't tried this, so I don't know for sure, but somebody told me they're cheaper, but they're also extremely dangerous. Our fire chief, Dennis Jankerson, talked about this, and, there's already been, this was a week ago, close to a week ago, one person who's shown up at the hospital had several fingers blown off. A couple of years ago, there was a Macklin Deli burned to the ground because fireworks landed on the roof, started the roof on fire. Just last weekend, Friday night, I think, Thursday, Friday night, there were fireworks that were responsible for lighting a fire at the Cleveland High School in Dutchtown. So fireworks are really, really dangerous. And especially in this dense environment. I mean, if you're out in the country on a farm, they're still dangerous to you, but they're, not as dangerous to others in other buildings. So please don't shoot off fireworks. I know you asked about a higher fine. Last year, the police department issued about 30 tickets, summonses for shooting off fireworks. They will continue to enforce fireworks this year. But as you know, if you're sitting at your house and listening to the fireworks and trying to figure out where that exactly came from, sound is hard to figure that out. So our police department will be out trying to enforce the fireworks ordinance. It's not an easy ordinance to enforce. And so again, we're asking you and your neighbors to just don't shoot off fireworks in our city.
Last question we have, Mayor, back to masks, which is the most popular topic.
Masks.
This person's asking about exemptions for individuals who might have autism or a
Yes.
sensory disability. Can you
Yes.
speak to some of the things that are exempt from that?
Yes, I did not go through all the exceptions, but I had them on my phone. But so people with some respiratory illnesses, wearing a mask is difficult for them. They don't have to do it. People who have some skin conditions, as I understand it, you've got to find a mask that doesn't irritate the skin condition. If masks if it's a medical issue for you, you'll be exempted from it. But most people, the majority of people, don't have those medical conditions, and so the majority of us have got to wear a mask.
Mayor, that's all the questions we have time for today.
That's it? All right, well, let me just close with something that some of you may be thinking about. This is Live with Lida, and it's just that. It's live. And last week, as I was ending up the session on Friday, I read comments that were on some letters, some cards that had been given to me. And let me just say that reading that whole card was a mistake, and I'm very sorry for it. The video was taken down on Friday late afternoon, and I know many of you are interested in that. I just want to reiterate, it was a mistake, and I'm very sorry. Thank you all. Let me say this, changing the subject. Have a good 4th of July weekend. Have a safe weekend. Spend some time with your friends and your family. If you're out in public, wear a mask. And thanks so much. We'll be back with Live with Lida, not Friday because it's 4th of July, but we'll be back next week. Thank you all. Appreciate it.